We'll pick up again on the morning of the 25th, and this is the first phase of Operation Epsom. And I'll probably just leave this overlay on the map for the next few days just to give context, even if I'm not describing anything associated with it. And it has never been my intention to really cover anything related to the ground war. I'm really covering only the things that apply to the wing, like on this day when they are flying in direct support of this operation. There's no way to get through this vast amount of information related to the wing and look at every little thing, but I will have a brief look at what's going on here, and I'm using Victory in the West Volume 1. It's one of the British official histories of the campaign, and we have a paragraph that applies to today. And it begins soon after 4 o'clock on the morning of the 25th. In a thick ground mist that persisted for some hours, the 49th Division advanced on a 2-brigade front. So they would start 2 brigades lined up, probably something like that, and then pushing down to the south. By 9:15 a.m., the 146th, attacking with 2 battalions, captured Basse-des-Fontaines against stiff opposition, and by early afternoon went on and reached the edge of the woods that crown a spur north of Vendée. So Basse-des-Fontaines is right there, and then the spur that it mentions is actually right here. It's hard to tell from a view just like this, but that is a very prominent hill that has a commanding view of the entire area. Meanwhile, the 147th Brigade on their left, attacking with only 1 battalion, found the larger village of Fontenay firmly held, and though they fought hard and suffered heavy casualties, they could not get beyond the northern outskirts. So attacking right down there to the main village and then stopped by the German forces before entering. It goes on to say that the 2nd Battalion did not go forward to pursue the attack until 9 o'clock in the evening. Most of the village was occupied, but it was not clear of the enemy, and fighting continued throughout the night. So this attack to the west of the targets that are about to be hit by 144 Wing was only preliminary to the overall Epsom plan, with the intent to capture high ground like the hill that we saw earlier, with the main attack coming on the next day. And well, I guess it turns out I am more interested in this than I thought I would be. I'll probably just continue the story briefly, kind of like that as we go, until the 29th, when the attack stalls out. And I'll start with the summaries. 441, 12 of our aircraft dive-bombed 2 places, pinpointed, and it gives 2 sets of coordinates that we'll have a look at in just a bit here. 8 hits were seen on the targets, and there were 2 near misses. Shortly after noon, 6 Spitfires bombed Demoville. 3 bombs overshot. 1 aircraft attacked a gun position with cannon and machine guns. And 442 describes a bombing mission about 8 miles behind the lines, started at 0745. Bombs dropped in a small area, moderate flak. Pilot Officer Young's coupe top hit 2 targets, 1 flight for each. On 30-minute readiness from 0900, representation at church service at 1100 was entirely ground personnel, many of the pilots being tied up with intelligence for briefing, others tied to a crap game. So bombing 12:15, 2 flights ready, 1 recalled, the other made 3 hits, 1 miss with 2 hang-ups or 2 hung bombs. 6 on immediate readiness, 6 on 15-minute readiness at 14:15. Flight Officer McDuff had a special job of counting bomb holes on the beach for a group captain after a slight accident with the Oster. That's actually kind of hilarious when you think about it. I'm wondering who the group captain was. I don't think Johnny Johnson had his promotion to group captain yet. So somebody in charge, in other words at B3, didn't appreciate McDuff's handling of the Oster apparently. Shipping patrol at 1700 hours, 2 flights of 6, and again at 2040. 3 flights of 4, uneventful. Middleton returned with an Oster and a load of bread. Rained during the evening, rumble of guns in the distance, the steadiest heard for the last 10 days. And 443 Squadron describes the day as weather clear and very warm. Squadron on immediate readiness from dawn. 7 aircraft scrambled at 11:15 but returned on patrolling without incident at 1200 hours. Another 2,000 cigarettes were received for the squadron from Calgary Malting and Brewing Company. Flight Lieutenant Stovall transferred to B Flight as second in command to Flight Lieutenant Prest. Flight Lieutenant Trokey is now second in command to Flight Lieutenant Wilson in A Flight. So with that, we'll move on to these individual missions. Now, first up is a dive bombing mission 0640 to 0720 carried out by 441 Squadron, and they describe dive bombing 2 different sets of coordinates. 8 direct hits and 2 near misses were seen, down at 0720. And I took some pretty extreme care when it came to getting these target locations nailed down to the right spot. The imagery that we see here is from the 24th, so this was the day prior. Now, thinking about the photographs we have here, I don't think the targets were picked based on this set of photography. To get the film back to England processed, analyzed, and then get that information out to the field with coordinates and targets, that I just don't see that happening overnight. Now, the northernmost target is right here in this orchard, and thinking about what type of target would it be typical for a Spitfire to dive bomb, and what type of target would typically be found in an orchard like this, I'm thinking command post, personally. Something that wouldn't be too terribly mobile, something that could be pinned down to a location you could count on it being there the next day. But whatever it was, headquarters, vehicles, ammo dump, or whatever, it would have most likely been requested through a command post, either attached to the Corps or the Division, forwarded up to the Group Control Center, Kenway, and then, if approved, divvied out to the individual wings and squadrons for execution. And I've been trying to dig around. I was hoping it would be a little bit more definitive as we get into the descriptions of this type of mission. On the exact doctrine that was being used, it changed so often in the RAF, and at this point, I'm not sure if it was like the standard cab rank system where you would have a forward controller with eyes on these locations talking to the aircraft, and then we're going to see later smoke artillery rounds going in to mark these locations as well. I don't think that system, even though they had used it in North Africa, I don't think that system was used until a little bit later in the campaign. But that's one of those details I'm going to have to probably end up digging through some Typhoon Squadron records to really come to grips with and figure out exactly what the current doctrine was. We have one more target called out down to the south. This one is a little bit more definitive. I think I know exactly what they did hit here. I mean, obviously this orchard is a good candidate. Something was already bombed. The other possibility is right here. We see these sort of not exactly circular pockmarks in the ground here. We can also see that there's been some obvious vehicle traffic at some point leading to it. Now that could be due to the farm, but what I'm thinking here is artillery or anti-aircraft emplacements. It would be typical to have the gun in the middle and then around it, just like you see here, these little pockmarks, which would in reality just be the magazines for additional rounds for the gun, although you would typically be able to see something in the middle if that were the case. And, well, I just happen to have an example of what I'm talking about here. Now let me go to a location we're going to run in on the 28th, down here at Villers-Bocage, and there's an example, or rather several examples of gun sights, and these are almost certainly 88s, big anti-aircraft guns, and you can see, especially clearly up here, the magazines around the periphery with the gun in the middle. More examples up here, and that's really what those locations we were just looking at reminded me of, with the exception of the big, obvious, revetted gun in the middle. And I'll go back to that location. And, well, I suppose it would have been nice if they had mentioned exactly what these targets were in the descriptions. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But those are just examples of typical targets that would be pre-planned like this. Okay, so now we're on to the second mission, and this is going to be 0745 to 0845, practically the exact same mission. And we have the same targets as the primary, and these are 12 bombs from east to west, 8 to 3,000 feet, especially successful on the north target. And then we have wood, long and narrow, 4066, bombed instead of south target. So if I come down here to the south target location, I don't have any way of knowing exactly what wood they were referring to there. My guess, however, is that this strip of wood right here is the only one that really matches the description of being an obvious long, narrow wood. So possibly even right here we can see a lot of vehicle traffic and a lot of movement coming into this location. So that actually might have been the exact alternate target that they did hit on this strike. No enemy aircraft opposition, flak, moderate accurate light north of the center of town. And it notes that smoke was 3 minutes late, and weather 10/10ths perfect. I'm not sure if they're being sarcastic there or, well, more likely just 10/10ths cloud cover, but perfect visibility. In other words, no haze or fog or anything like that. And smoke 3 minutes late, again referring to the marking of targets with smoke artillery rounds. Now, getting away from this location for a second, we have an 1115 to 1200 scramble by 443 Squadron. And this is weather continues clear and very warm, visibility very good. 7 aircraft scrambled at 11:15 and patrolled the British beachhead without incident. Up next we have a dive bombing mission, again carried out by 441 Squadron. So their second dive bombing mission of the day, and this is against a different target, away from the location where the attack on the ground is happening. And this is dive bombing, Demoville. 3 direct hits were seen. 1 aircraft attacked a gun position with cannon and machine gun. And I don't have an exact location called out when it comes to coordinates, but you do see the village right there as it would have appeared. And this again is imagery from the 24th. I was unable, just looking here inside the village, to spot something that looked like an obvious target. However, to the north of the village, we do have some very, very obvious spots with what looks like another, well, actually, come to think of it, that does look an awful lot like an 88 position like we saw earlier. Some more up here, so possibly, artillery emplacements right there. But what drew my eye up here was these very obvious dug-in positions, some sort of vehicle or equipment within these dug-in, revetted positions. And then, as I was continuing to look up here, what really caught my eye was, look at that artillery bombardment right there in that area. That is as heavy a concentration I have seen anywhere. That's just amazing to me. But getting back to the missions, next up we're going to have a 1220 to 1300 dive bombing mission back into the same location. So let's see how things look right now for 442 Squadron. And this is described as 4 bombs right on target from northeast to southwest, bombing from 8 to 3,000 feet. In a dive, again, just like we've seen on all the other deliveries, 1 near miss and 1 hang up, and the hang up was jettisoned in enemy territory. No enemy aircraft opposition, flak, meager, inaccurate light, too tense cloud at 7,000 feet, visibility good. Okay, so up next we have a patrol 1655 to 1835, and this says 6 aircraft, X-Ray, William Victor, 6 aircraft, Juno Sword, uneventful, no enemy aircraft opposition, nil flak, 10 tenths at 4,000, visibility poor in the east, and the west clear, visibility good. And then another section of 6 gets airborne. Okay, I remember what happened here. It was 1 section east and 1 section west, with everybody back down at 1840. And then we have 1 more patrol, 2114 to 2155. 4 aircraft in the east area, 4 aircraft in the west area, and 3 aircraft in the center. Uneventful. No enemy aircraft opposition, nil flak. Cloud, 10 tenths at 4,000. Visibility 10 miles to 1,000 yards. And everyone down for the day at 2155. And I guess one note about the way that I plot out these generic patrols, I think they do, in fact, rove out much, much further afield than that. I just plot them down right there in that area. It's just that I don't really have anywhere better to plot them down as going. And with that, we're going to move on to the 26th, and we could already see hints there in the way the weather was turning of the bad weather that's moving in, and again is going to plague operations in the air and on the ground. But we'll have a look at how the 26th goes tomorrow. So until then, thanks again, and I'll see you next time.